Well, thank you so much. And thank you for inviting the USGS to this important workshop. Um, we really do appreciate it. And so I was asked to talk about the activities within the USGS that are focused on the important topic of critical minerals. So I will do that. But first, we all like to start with definitions. And this is the uh, definition of a critical mineral as established in the Energy Act of 2020. And that's essential to the economic or national security of the United States, and specifically the supply chain of which is vulnerable to disruption. And these are form a critical component throughout our economy from manufacturing to production and use in so many different areas, from energy generation, the healthcare industry, and transportation. Of course, we're all seeing a major spike in the demand for critical minerals that go into the electronic vehicle industry. And as you all know, the defense and national security industries use critical minerals throughout their manufacturing and production lines. So these commodities are, recently it's fun to see a reinvigoration of interest at the national scale across so many different political groups and as well as organizations and industry. So first, I'd like to talk about the work that's being done in our National Minerals Information Center. And this is the nation's authority on the supply chain and potential disruptions for mineral commodities throughout the US's economy. And this crowd is well aware of the annual minerals commodity summaries that we put out that lists the import reliance on various commodities. And on the right, you can see a diagram that just shows simply that the growing net import reliance of the U.S. on mineral commodities is certainly increasing and is expected to grow as our economy moves towards the green energy environment. So where are we going to get these things, and where do they come from? Well, right now, this is in 2020 a map showing where the U.S. imports from other countries, and you on the bottom left is the scale. So the redder the darker the color, the more commodities we import. And so, as you well know, we have important trading partners in Canada and throughout the Americas that help supply the mineral commodities critical for our economy. But we do have some uh, nations that aren't necessarily in free trade agreements, and for which some of the commodities are actually restricted. This is a diagram that the National Mineral Information Center put together, a year ago, 2 years, well, it's been 2018 this came out, so a couple years ago. And this really just points to the comparison of the US net import reliance versus that in China. And I'm not picking on China, this is just a good example of how major economies can compete for the resources at the global scale. So each of these quadrants, you can think of those that are, say, under 50% of net import reliance for either nation, aren't necessarily going to be a threat to their economy. But as you go move in towards the quadrants in, say, for the U.S. in the upper left quadrant, quadrant 2, those commodities, we have a great net import reliance and not a large competition for them from, say, the Chinese economy. But in quadrant 4, those commodities are both scarce on the national, on the global scale, and both of our nations are essentially competing in an economic fashion for their supply. So U.S. Has was the USGS was has been directed through the Energy Act of 2020 to develop and publish an updated list of the critical minerals. And most of all of you know have seen and are very well familiar with the 2018 list. The 2021 list just came out yesterday and is listed in the Federal Register. So that list was actually developed through research at National Minerals Information Center on supply risk and potential disruption, but it was done in partnership with several other federal agencies. So we're not by ourselves out there putting this together. But what happens is the USGS does the research, and we put that out through the Department of Interior in the Federal Register. And that, again, just came out yesterday. So what is the list? So on the left is the list of commodities in the 2018 list. On the right, the really important part of the change is, we always look at changes. What was added was nickel and zinc. And then there was more more specific discussion on the individual rare earths. And for you folks where helium is such an important commodity, those were that helium, potash, rhenium, strontium, and uranium were actually dropped from the current list. And so then you've heard about this infrastructure supplemental, and this has really got my attention, all of USGS's attention right now. And the supplemental came through for an additional $320 million to the USGS to help collect new data and interpretations on the critical minerals of the nation. And that supplemental's going to be spaced out over 5 years. So we are directed to use the term of critical mineral as identified in the Energy Act. And what that does leave out does not include fuel minerals. And for us, fuel minerals, let's say for coal, there's been a lot of discussion of coal bearing critical mineral resources in this workshop. That fuel minerals portfolio is really, the DOE is the leading federal agency in doing research and evaluation for critical minerals in the fuel minerals. And so we support the DOE where we can. What is also not involved is the sand and gravel and stone, pumice, et cetera. So it really is looking at the mineral commodities. So the purpose of the new funding is to accelerate our fundamental resource and mapping mission of the USGS by continuing to develop topographic, which in our case is LIDAR, geologic maps, geochemical maps, and geophysical mapping of the nation. And then to try and accelerate the consolidation and integration of these data to provide interpretations of both the subsurface and what is new now in the language is mine waste is going to become a topic of thrust for the Earth Mapping Resources Initiative. And this act actually establishes the USGS's Earth MRI effort for the first time. So it codifies it in language in this act. Currently, our base appropriation is $10.6 million a year, and the new act adds, like I said, $320 million over the next 5 years. So this is a big deal for us, for sure. So what is the Earth MRI endeavor? It was established in 2019, so we're relatively young. And the overarching goal is to improve our knowledge of the geologic framework of the U.S. in areas that are permissive for hosting the undiscovered critical mineral resources. And this effort is a partnership between the USGS and the state geological surveys, as well as the private sector, to generate the state-of-the-art surface geologic maps, geophysical surveys, geochemical reconnaissance mapping of critical mineral commodities, as well as supporting LiDAR data acquisition to help understand and map the resources. There are multiple stakeholders in this, and the outcome of these just basic geologic data are can be used not beyond just the minerals industry, but these good basic maps and geophysical surveys really support groundwater, energy, and other natural hazards and other applications. So why do we need these data? Well, this is just a general diagram that talks about the time from exploration to developing a mine and making shiny metal to put into the economy. And so that time is on the x-axis, and this is just the number of prospects a typical exploration company will go through to evaluate and actually find a mine can really be into the thousands. So what we're trying to do in partnership with the state geological surveys is lower that curve so that we provide the basic information to help map where the permissive areas are and to try and narrow down the targets so that then the exploration industry can go through their target generation, drilling, evaluation, and resource definition component to shorten the timeline to bring the commodities into the national economy. So in order to do this, we are not going commodity by commodity. We're trying to do a mineral systems approach. And so when we do that, a mineral system is just a family of ore deposit types that are genetically linked in time, space, and shared tectonic processes. And this crowd is very familiar with this concept that depending on where you are in a plate tectonic setting, you can get various different mineral deposit types. And so this is just an example that we use for the mineral system that is we're using the porphyry, copper, moly, gold system. And so this really helps simplify our evaluation of where the permissive tracts are across the nation. So if you evaluate at the national scale for this mineral system, you're actually looking at this whole host of different deposit types, as shown in the chart, in the table on the right. And those different deposit types have principal commodities, some of which are critical minerals. They also have byproduct commodities, which are critical minerals. So it's an efficient way to go through and try and evaluate where the commodities would be. But it's a daunting task, and a lot of the state geological surveys who are on this phone here are partners with us. And we've had to break this down into a phased approach. And so we are on our starting our 4th year in this effort. And so we are on our phase 4 list of commodities and the mineral systems that host those. And so we are developing a series of maps that show where these are permissive. Now, they're very general maps, and I'll show you what that means in a minute. But this is going back to the just released list of critical minerals and what is retained and what is dropped. And so you can see uranium, potash, and helium have been taken off from the list, and nickel and zinc have been added. So we have published the results of the mapping of areas that are permissive for the phase 2 and phase 3 commodities. These are very general maps. In fact, they're so generalized that you should understand that within each one of these big blobs, so that our project phase 2 is in pink and our phase 3 are in blue, and the areas where they overlap are in the orangish or the tan color. But these are very broad tracks, and if you dug into the data, you would see that there are over 500 separate focus areas within those broad envelopes. So how we go about funding the states and funding new data collection based on a simple prioritization of, well, is the land status going to allow for mineral exploration and development? Because we have limited resources. I mean, $320 million sounds like an enormous amount of money, and it is, but we still have to be very frugal in where we fund projects to develop new geologic maps. So we are, though we're doing the assessment at the national scale, regardless of land ownership, when we get down to funding projects, we really need to try and avoid the national parks. This is that, common sense stuff, right? So wildlife areas. And then for tribal lands, we are reaching out to the tribes to see if they want to participate. And we have a big project going on, two big projects going on right now in the Western US in over Western Nevada and Southern California, where there's a lot of tribal engagement we're working through. And so we fund projects that we can leverage not only our funds, but other activities that are going on within the USGS Fund the States, as well as partnerships at the state to help support them if they have other funding. And as well as industry is starting to contribute to our AeroMag surveys. So this is a map of the projects we have funded so far through FY21 across the nation. And the gray in this is actually the focus areas that we have identified for the phase 2 part of our project. And so we use this mapping to guide our expenditures for projects as we stand them up, and we will do so into the future. So here's just an example of a new survey, and Tristan is on the phone. I saw him here. This is one that we put out for in partnership with the New Mexico and the Texas equivalents of the geological surveys. It helped us design this, and this is just showing the airborne magnetic data. There's also a companion radiometric surveys that have been put out with this. And so this is new data that includes the area around Round Top, north into in the southern New Mexico. And what's really fun about these data are it's generating a revolution of our understanding of the economic geology of the nation. And it's just so fun to watch the scientists from across the state agencies and the federal agencies, as well as the universities, dig into these data. And it's providing really a revolution in the economic geology field of economic geology. And it's really helping us identify concealed deposits that are potentially in this covered area. And this map is courtesy of Mark Boltman with the USGS down in Tucson. And it's some of the early modeling he's done on these data to try and understand the geometry of the alkali intrusions at depth. And you can see here in shown the arrow points to the cyanide intrusions at Wind Mountain, and areas that he predicts are concealed deposits that could potentially host critical minerals. So these data are very useful in modeling and to understand where the concealed deposits are. Now, I referred to the mine waste issue. So as all of us know, that mines are developed and the processing are focused on just a small list of commodities. You have a big copper porphyry system, so they go after for the mines produce primarily copper. But there are other commodities that are actually discarded on the waste piles that actually are critical to our nation's economy. So where are these waste piles on the landscape? And we are going to try to stand up a new and nationwide inventory of mine waste, regardless of land holdings, because quite frankly, you get into who owns what, and it just gets too complicated. And it's easier just to do it at the national scale for mapping the mine waste materials. And then we're going to follow up with a characterization activity to try and get at the commodities that could be, that are at least nominally within those waste piles, and do some rough volume estimates to try and get at a swag at the mineral content at the national scale in mine waste. So that effort is just spinning up, and we're trying to put together a strategic plan right now, and this will be done in partnership with the state geological surveys. And all of our data are released through made publicly available through the USGS's Earth MRI website that explains our projects, our upcoming projects, our funded projects, and the data are all publicly available there. So, and this is just specifically for this audience, for this workshop, I took a quick look at what we did for our phase 2 and phase 3 commodities, commodities and the mineral systems thereof for Oklahoma. And, Oklahoma is blessed with, as Abbas has, spoke to earlier, areas that are permissive for and are known to host some of the critical minerals. And one thing that we don't have a good handle on is the regional distribution of the commodities that are in the phosphate rich and black shales of the Mississippian, Devonian, and Ordovician sequences that are within Oklahoma. And we're trying to get at a regional geochemical reconnaissance effort is underway for other states looking at these different sedimentary horizons and the phosphate rich units within them. And we hope to expand this into the southern mid-continent as well as we go forward. And so that is, and the SMAC over here, that's been a center of a lot of attention in this workshop, is also known to host, lithium and cerium and magnesium and potash as well. So in the bottom left here these are the mineral systems that contain these different commodities. And so we're going to be working with the Oklahoma Geological Survey and the adjacent surveys this fiscal year to clean this up, to refine this kind of mapping at the national scale. And then that will help guide us in an allocation of resources for geologic mapping, for regional geochemical reconnaissance projects and new airborne surveys, as well as LIDAR data collection. And you folks in Oklahoma know that buried over these in this map are a lot of tribal lands, and so we'll be needing to reach out to the tribal entities as we move forward as well, to see if they want to participate. So with that, I will take any questions. Thank you.